Hey there, friends. Welcome to Real Life Conversations for Christian Coaches. I'm your host, Teresa McCloy.
And I'm your co-host, Erica Vinson. We're so glad you're listening in today. Here on the podcast, each week we want to have real conversations to help you grow successful and sustainable coaching businesses, and yet still stay grounded in what truly matters.
We share practical tools, honest stories, and even our own experiences as coaches, as well as inviting some great guests onto the show to support you as a coach to learn to live from a place of rest, not rush.
So whether you're just getting started or have been coaching for years, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's conversation, and we are so excited to welcome our guest, Albert Pellissier. And so, Teresa, I know you and Albert go back a little bit, so why don't you introduce Albert for us?
I would be glad to. Albert and I go back a ways. We were just talking before we hit record. In the last few years, we haven't seen each other near as much, but it's great to reconnect. Albert, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And it's great to reconnect over something as exciting as a new book that you've put out into the market. But Albert and I were actually in a mastermind together. I think it was 2019. I know I'm pretty sure it was before COVID. Some of it may even been during COVID. It is funny to me. We talk about it often on the podcast, how we kind of mark time as before and after and during the pandemic. But right around those times. So it's been 4 or 5 years, and we've both kind of gone and done our separate work in our separate ways. We were catching up before recording, but I knew that Albert had a brand new book out. We've reconnected to through a friend of ours, Justin, and you need to have him on the podcast. And I said, let's do it. I remember what it was like to put out your first book, the marketing, promoting, wanting to share it with the world. So Albert, we're so glad you're here to share with us today.
Yeah, I've been excited about it. I'm glad we did reconnect.
Yeah, me too, Fred. Me too. But let's dive in because we have lots to talk about and not enough time. So here we go. Let's talk about this book. Why don't you share with our listeners the name of the book? Let's just start right out with the basics. The name of the book, where they can find it, and then why did you write the book?
So the book is called What's on Your Back Burner, and it's using Dormant Desire to Relight Your Fire. And, a book is one of those things, it's always been on my bucket list. And I even made a previous attempt at writing one and wrote it and put it out to beta readers and got decent feedback on it. But when it came back, it just really didn't feel original enough. I wanted something that really was organic and came from my own experience. And so this was really my shot. I felt like, okay, this is something new and different in the market. I don't think anyone's really positioning these ideas just like this. And so I'm really excited about it. And I feel like it's a great book to be out there forever. And you can get it on Amazon, of course.
Yeah.
And that's probably the easiest place to go.
So Amazon might be the easiest, but your website is actually backburnerbook.com. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's going to still take you to a link, but the good thing about if you go to that backburnerbook.com, there's a lot of worksheets. It's really a workbook. And so I wanted people to be able to just go on there and download as many worksheets if they did this in a group format without having to sign in or log in or become a member. So I just put some buttons on there that you could just have all of the resources for free for the book if you go to that website.
Perfect. Well, let's dive into content. Erica's going to chime in as well, but let's talk a little bit of what's inside that cover. What are we walking people through? You and I said right before we started, we have content out there as well. We've written a book, and they might be similar in some spaces, but sometimes your message uniquely resonates with your audience. So walk us through what's inside that cover?
When I ask people what's on your back burner, and I'll do this, in a keynote speech or on a workshop, really what I want to know is, what is that goal, that project, that initiative, or maybe ultimately it's really like a calling that you have. But for whatever reason, you just never made it happen. And maybe you've taken a few stabs at it. and, giving it a shot, and then it kind of fell apart, and then you put it back on the back burner again. But for some odd reason, now this can go back decades. People will
Mm.
have a back burner idea on their list for decades. It just doesn't go away. And so my curiosity is, why do you have something that's still calling to you like this, that regardless of, how much traction you've ever been able to make on it, there's still just a little flicker of hope about it. Like, to me, that's important. And I want people to wonder, yeah, why is this sort of still here haunting me in the background?
I love that illustration, Albert. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking, even if something's on the back burner for us, it's taking up space. And so, share just a little bit about what your experience has been like in actually discovering what's there. And now, what are we going to do about it?
Well, personally, or through probably, evidence of just people who I've worked with, I find that almost everybody can pretty quickly answer that question. So it's not buried that deep. It's right there, just below the
Mhm.
surface for most people. And I really believe that if it's not their actual calling, I think it's a stepping stone to their calling. And that this is why it doesn't go away. It's because whatever this little project is, it could be the first step towards figuring out what it is you've always been called to do, and maybe you don't know what it is. And then sometimes people just know. It's like, a lot of times it is writing a book for people, or it's starting some sort of like an animal shelter, or some kind of program they want to do for kids. A lot of times it's just a creative service to their fellow man. They've kind of talked themselves out of, like, they're not ready yet, or, I don't have the time, the space, or the resource to do it. There's all these plausible reasons in the way. And that's really the next thing I ask them is, after I ask you what's on your back burner, my next question is, why do you think you haven't done it?
Mm. Yeah.
And everybody has like a pretty short list that they can quickly come up with of why they think they haven't done it.
Yeah. So really, you're talking about awareness. You're talking about coming to that place of bringing it. I think there's somewhere that you use the language of like that relighting of the fire again, bringing it back up to the surface that you've buried. Yeah. So what are some of the tangible things? And you don't have to go into the whole process. You need to read the book or work with Albert if you want to do the whole process. But what is one tangible thing that happens in that process for people that you see kind of a new awareness for them?
Well, that first list of reasons, which I could also call excuses, right? They're all plausible. I say, hey, these are the damn good reasons you haven't done it, but
Mhm.
this is not the real reason. And the next step of the process really is for them to say, okay, imagine you're doing it, whatever it is, you're engaged in it. And then what I want to know is, now that it's happening, what is it that bothers you now? Now, this is a place that people don't ever get to, because it's always in the future they're going to do this. So they don't even take the time and space to say, if I really engaged in this, are there things about it that I wouldn't like? And here's the real eye opener. When I ask this question, what do you not like about it now that you're doing it? The list pours out, usually 10, 12, 15, or 20 of reasons that they think it's not a good idea to do it. This is the awareness piece. It's like, oh, okay. When you look at this long list of reasons, this is the real reason they aren't doing it. It's because deep down, this is what they fear will happen if they take action on this back burner goal. But it's not occurring to them because, it's always some other excuse in the way. I'm not ready. I don't have enough money. I don't have the time. My kids are still at home, whatever. It's a long thing.
Yeah.
But people are honestly shocked when they read that list to themselves for the first time. And I did speak about 3 or 4 weeks ago at Justin's conference, and there were 80 or so Christian coaches in the room, and there were people actually sitting at the table crying as they wrote the list down. They were in tears. I could see they were emotional. I did call them out and had a microphone, brought over to them to say, "Are you okay?" And people are sharing things that they had no idea was kind of the big obstacle really holding them back from this. And so that's a moment of awakening. And I love seeing it. I really, get my charge of watching people see that for the first time and kind of being knocked down or shocked by it, honestly. It's like, wow, I had no idea this is what I was thinking. And that's the most fulfilling part to me is seeing that happen in real time. And, within 10, 15 minutes, it's not like they got to come do some, 7-day workshop. This happens in 15 minutes.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and offering them the space to name the awareness. What is the thought maybe that's holding them back? We do a lot of work around 3 centers of intelligence. The thoughts drive the feelings that then drive the action or the inaction. They get a result. And so it sounds like you're creating a great space for that. So once people have named what their internal conflict is or the false belief, what's next, Albert?
In people's own imagination, these things are basically self-centered fears.
Mhm.
And they have an exaggerated sense of importance. And so when they keep it to themselves, even from themselves, they're kind of big boogeymen, they're big fangs, teeth, they really seem daunting. That's why sometimes people are in shock when they realize what the list is. But I encourage people to get a burner buddy, is what I call it, and to read this list out loud. And I will do this, in a workshop or in a keynote speech. I surrender the room and let them all read their list to the person next to them. And just saying it out loud. Now, the other person on the other side is instructed just to listen, not to, say, oh, no, that's not true. I know you better than that. No, they're just supposed to sit there silently and listen. As the person says it out loud, it loses a little bit of the grip over them.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I encourage them to do this every day for up to 2 weeks. By the time they get to day 10 to 14, it seems so silly to them. They start really saying like, well, I know I'm still thinking this on some level, but this is really not enough to keep me from doing it. And so what happens is they just find themselves taking these little micro actions in the direction of this goal that, again, sometimes, honestly, it's been on people's back burner for 20 or 30 years. But they find themselves making a phone call or starting an outline for the book or hiring a book coach, and they just take little steps. And you guys know, once you start taking action, then things follow and things start to happen. And then they're on their way.
Yeah. This reminds me a lot in the process that we do and that we train coaches in. We have some similar work, and we knew this of like defining a future thing. I am doing this in my marriage. I am doing this in my work. I'm doing this in my spiritual life, whatever in it. And once you say that enough times out loud, it starts to take, ownership of that is the person I am, not this person who was living back here, in my back burner stuff. I'm living now, I'm lighting the fire, I'm moving it forward. And I can put some action steps around that. And like you say, I love that you're saying some of the many things that we say. It's a phone call. It's one small micro step at a time. I was on a call last night with some of our certified coaches, and one of them said, I'm really having trouble with, this big project. And the other coach that coached with her and said, what if you do 15 minutes and do one thing? So that's really the work, is breaking it down and naming it, putting it out there, reigniting it, moving through it. So yeah, back burner, you're going to want to read through this process. It sounds so good, so interesting. Albert, I want to take it to something a little bit practical. That I remember of a story when you and I were hanging out together in a mastermind. And you just talked about sharing your story with someone else, like saying it to them. They don't really get to reflect back. Oh, no, you're better than that. So I love all that, because we do that kind of work too. Just be a listener. Just be a soul that's present with this person and listen in. But I remember we were in the mastermind together. You had this kind of whole breakthrough around sales. We were working with Justin in that sales place. And you had this breakthrough. You sold, you call it Man Camp. You're still doing it to this day, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So it's a retreat program. He'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit, but it's specifically for men around some of these kind of breakthroughs. And you'd sold it, biggest sales you'd ever had. You'd done all this, but yet you kind of had a fear about inviting them to the next thing. And
So
I walked through that myself, but kind of share with us how you got through that and what were some key things that helped you take action around that specific fear.
Okay, so that is the reason I was in Justin's group. He was teaching me a sales process. I knew that's where I needed to work. I had less issue getting people to come to my retreat, but I would always avoid any sort of an upsell at the retreat. And that's really the secret to taking this from a hobby into a profession. If you've got to have some sort of a big back end that you're selling people on, so you can make a living, without always having this one-off sales, one-off sales, one-off sales, where it's just, trying to fill a pipeline forever is difficult. But if you can, make yourself available to solve people's deeper problems or who are willing to work with you longer, that's the way to go. But I would always get to the point in the retreat on the Saturday night, and I would find an excuse not to make the offer. So, it's classic sales avoidance. And the deep-rooted, idea I had, and this is what would have been my block that I would have uncovered doing my own process, was that my mother told me a story when I was a child, and she was a single mother of my brother and I. My mom and dad were divorced, when I was 3. And she told me the story later on, maybe when I was a teenager. And she said, oh, there were times when I was, trying to be a woman in the 60s, trying to get a job and work and support you guys, that I really just didn't have enough money for all of us to eat. And I would, feed you and your brother, and I would go hungry. Now, I remember as a boy just like crying here and having empathy for my mom, who was like, oh man, my poor mom was literally starving to feed my brother and I. But what accidentally got wired into my belief system was that, sometimes a little bit of money can make the difference between people having food on their table.
Mm.
So when I was in the sales process and talking about my own sales avoidance, again, not aware of this, but essentially what it was the idea that, hey, if I sell this upsell, $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 annual package, I'm taking food off people's table. And that personally, I don't really need the money in that way of like, I'm going to be okay if I don't make this sale. But if I make the sale, I'm putting these people in a position where they might have food on their table. And so Justin actually just took me through a little exercise live, at his retreat.
I was there. I was in the room.
Yeah, to make me realize that wasn't true. And so he started talking about, okay, Albert, tell me about some of your current clients or whatever. And, I started saying, oh yeah, they came, they had a $40,000 a year job, and now they're making 6 figures. And he goes, well, did you take food off that guy's table? And I'm saying, no, I didn't. He says, is it possible you're putting more and better food on his table? And I said, yeah, you're right. And so it was really just replace that again, that self-centered fear, exaggerated fear that I'm taking away somebody instead of seeing the other part that I really was helping this person.
Mhm. So
And
much
so that,
connection there, though, to childhood story,
yes,
right? And we just talked about this today in our network. We do a lot of story work and mind mapping, or not mind mapping, but life story timelines and things, and the connection from childhood. And, we were even looking back at our last 20 years and dots on our map and things. And so sometimes these back burner dreams that you have, I'm sure some of the lists that people go through are tied to a false belief from a child. And your mom never told you that story with the intent that
No.
that you would take it in that direction or that it would affect you and other things. Eric and I both could tell stories of our money mindset things. Like it's just a part of, I think for everyone that goes into business for themselves, it's developing. We all have different stories. I had the same experience. Erica was present in this. Do you remember, Erica, when we sat across the table at a first retreat that we had, and we had some women that had come to eat dinner with us afterwards, and I hadn't made any type of next steps for them. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anything. It wasn't I was avoiding sales. I didn't even plan for it. And she looked at me across the table and she goes, "So what's next?" I'm like, "I don't know." It's one of my classic stories I tell as well, that, Eric and I kind of like, we'll get to you on.
Look at this now. Look how successful I am.
Yeah, I was gloating in the glory of the experience of the weekend with these women and thought that would fill their tanks. And yet, and I think every business owner, every coach listening needs to hear, like, always have the, whether it's some humongous order or it's booking them for a call to talk with you, whatever it is, there needs to be an actionable step and most likely something that they could move forward with in a way of committing to a longer term relationship with you. So,
as somebody put it to me, they said, "Well, Albert, at the end of the retreat, have you solved all of their problems that you're capable of solving?" I was like, "Well, no, there's plenty more I could do, if they were willing, but it's sort of like, settling for the satisfaction. Well, at least I got them here and I had the guts to sell them into this, $1,000 plus retreat. And yeah, now I'm going to go kind of recuperate from this and get fired up and try to get motivated to sell the next one. Not
yeah.
really, not really thinking, there was either have, and also that I'm cheating them out of the rest of what I would have for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There's a flip switch to that, isn't there? So,
Yeah. And I said, look, you said something about that list, the 15 real reasons that they aren't doing it. I find almost all of them are childhood related, honestly.
mm, interesting.
So one of the categories that I ended up submitting my book into Amazon, it was inner child, because I really feel like 90% plus of the time, it's just something that you picked up sort of like that, inadvertently, accidentally. You're not even thinking it's something that would have any relevance whatsoever. But, what I was discovering personally is in my 50s, it was just these strings of stories, of childhood stories. Again, it wasn't that anyone was, abusing me or torturing me or anything. It's just little anecdotes that my mom and dad and grandparents or teachers told me that I just co-opted into my belief system and didn't realize, it would still be holding me back 4 decades later.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you just answered part of it, Albert, but that was going to be my next question was, who is this book for? So you mentioned already anyone that's really saying, I would love to connect some dots in my story with this inner child piece. Who else is this book for as you think about what's on your back burner?
I found it's probably most effective for people who are doing work that they feel is personal.
Mm.
So, if let's say you're a salesman, you're selling cars. Okay, probably not as much. I'm sure it's still there. But when you're a coach and you're coaching clients and what you're really selling is your own wisdom and your own personal story. And then you have all of the self-doubt and imposter syndrome that goes along with that, where, you really have the heart to deliver, real value to people. I find the more personal whatever you're doing is, the more these types of stories are going to be the block that you have no idea is there.
Mm. Yeah. You're really naming so many of our listeners that are in helping professions as coaches and therapists and spiritual directors, and all the ways that we show up to listen to other stories is we talk about this all the time, and even our coach skills development that Erica really teaches of our own story can get in the way of their story, right? And we go to trying to solve the problem or judgment or things, and we don't listen all the way through and let all those back burner things kind of come to the surface. And so, because the fear creeps in of, oh my gosh, that triggered for me something from my own. So continuing to explore your story and this inner child piece and some of the things that you're talking about here, is always going to help you show up as your best self. That our triangle of how we talk about our process, your real self, your real life, your real work. So this book is really focusing on that real self piece and exploring in that real self world. I'm partway through the book. I will admit I haven't got the whole thing done yet, but I am partway through. So come and read along with me, read along with others in our community that I'm sure will engage Albert with your book. So let's wrap up. Erica, where can they find more about Albert, and where can they connect with him and all the things?
Well, as we mentioned earlier in the episode, backburnerbook.com is his website. And Albert, anything else as far as connecting that would be helpful for listeners that are looking for you?
I mean, really, that's my one-stop shop, just to connect to me. You can do anything you want there. Get the book. You can get the book resources for free. You can set up a
Love
call
that.
if you want to talk about it. I just try to make it easy. Just go there, and if you need some help, yeah, that's the place to go. And I will say, Teresa, most people can easily read up to the point when they have to do that worksheet. And even though it only takes 10 minutes, I can't tell you how many people I've
Yep.
just on the street and they go, "Oh, Albert, yeah, I read your book up to the point. Yeah. And then I saw that worksheet and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, well, and then, a lot of
Yeah.
times,
No, good point, friend. Yeah, I have made it past there, but I'll be honest to say I didn't do the worksheet yet, but I've read
I
past
said,
there.
that's where everybody saw it. Said, and look, I'm going to be honest with you, right? I know that tool is so powerful that when I was writing this book and the manuscript was done and the beta readers had already read it and the feedback came back was great, that manuscript sat on the corner of my desk for about 4 months. Right?
Mm,
And I had to stare at that title, what's on your back burner? It's like, oh my God, yeah, the book is on my back burner. And I knew if I did the worksheet, I would know why I'm procrastinating on getting this to the editor who was just begging me to send everything in. And I had to do my own worksheet
yep.
to uncover the obstacle that was in my way. And the moment I did my own worksheet, I sent it in and he had everything he needed in 2 days. But there's resistance around knowing the answer because when you know the answer, then you really know you have to do something about it. And so
Mm.
I'm guilty of it too, which is
And
why
we
I
will
really
continue to be. We will continue to do our
it's
own work.
brilliant.
I always say I have to use my own stuff to get me through, and that's why we're passionate about it. And I know that you're very passionate about this. And I've watched it from afar kind of progress to where it's at. One of the other little things we'll mention real quick before we hop off is when I first met Albert, he was known for this. He's still doing them. He does these little retreats, an event called Man Camp. You can't beat the title. Obvious who it's for and what he's going to do. And I think is it a 48-hour or 3-day event?
It's a 3-day. We start on a Friday afternoon, we end on a Sunday afternoon, but it's really an intense, deep introspection for men. It's a boutique experience. I limit it to 8 guys at a time. I
Yep.
have 2 on the calendar already for 2026, and it's really where they come to get total clarity of, what do they want and where are they going? And you would think a lot of people know, but a lot of men these days just are not sure what they should be
Yeah.
doing in their lives. And so they leave on Sunday and they know for sure what's the next step.
So if you're not a book reader, but you're an event goer, you might consider hooking up with Albert around one of those intensive events as well. But Albert, it's been great to have you. We'll make sure all the links to everything are in the show notes. And yeah, connect with Albert and check out what might be on your back burner.
Well, thank you for helping me spread the word.
You're welcome, friend. This has been an extraordinary moment for me. I end every podcast by sharing that every ordinary day has an extraordinary moment. You just have to look for them. And just reconnecting with Albert today has been a joy for me. It was the first time for Erica to meet Albert in person. But it's just so fun to forge new relationships or rekindle old ones. So thanks, Albert, for sharing the moment. And we will see you all next week with Real Life Conversations for Christian Coaches.